Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt and I'm a messenger with United Network News. We're the news division of United Network, and each and every week we bring you the real news. And we release a lot of information throughout the week that includes in-depth news as told through the eyes of our field messengers. Those are more the local stories. And then the team and I do a bit more digging on some of the headlines you may have seen out there. And we try to give you some of the background information behind it. We talk about the restoration of our planet and how we're creating what we call the new Earth. And we also have updates from the Global Intelligence Agency of what's really happening here on this planet in what is called this good versus evil battle. Right? You've heard about this in all the religious texts. Well, guess what? You're living through this right now. If you want more information about who we are, what we do, visit our website, unitednetwork.earth. What you're listening to now is a podcast, obviously. It is a week in review of some of the big stories that we touched on this previous week. So if you need to catch up on anything, maybe you missed some of the content that was released, because like I said, we put out a lot, or here's a great thing, and if you haven't done this yet, maybe take a moment to do this, and that is share one of these episodes or perhaps the entire podcast with someone you care about, someone that needs to have the information. Maybe they're not ready to become a member. Maybe they're, not interested in listening all the time, but maybe there's some content that we're going to talk about today that would be useful for someone in your life. And maybe just share the link to this episode, because it is available for free on all podcast players out there, as well as if you go to our website, you can grab it there as well. With everything that we release and all the content, we always encourage you guys to think critically and to ask your own questions. Some of this stuff, it's next level stuff, right? It is big stuff. And if you've never listened to UNN before, any of our reports, it might be a little jarring, like, what did she just say? Because you're going to get stuff here that nobody else talks about. And that's because no one else has the clearance to be able to get the information that we get from the Global Intelligence Agency. So when you hear that stuff, just let it process. Even if something doesn't make a lot of sense, something doesn't resonate with you, don't throw everything out. Okay, one of the things that I've learned in this whole process of discovery is sometimes you just get information at different times and you got to let it sink in, and then, someone else tells you something else, and then you have an experience of something else happens in your life. Sooner or later, the puzzle pieces start to come together. Okay, just let it kind of sit with you and keep going through these reports. And when something does click, we do encourage you to share what you know with others. Like I said, share this podcast episode. But also, if someone isn't ready for it, just let it be. You cannot force people to wake up. You cannot force people to embrace a totally different way of living than what we've been told our entire life. When you tell people that pretty much everything that they've ever been taught is a lie, that is very upsetting for a lot of people. And you may be that little seed that starts the conversation, but if they're not ready for it, just be that seed and walk away. Don't throw this stuff in people's faces, because I promise you it doesn't work. I've tried it. We've all made our mistakes with that. And really, it's about being here, doing your job here, which for many of us is holding the light and being ready to go when it's time to go to help restore our planet and waking up as many people as possible. But that, again, you just got to be mindful with how you do it. Sometimes just being in the room and being your own light is going to draw people to you. And if they ask questions and want to know what is that behind you and and how you feel and your attitude, we live in a crazy world right now. And if you're able to be the stable person who is full of light and positivity, you're going to draw people to you. And sometimes that's the best way to do it, right? Okay, well, let's go ahead and get to it, because we got a lot of news to cover today. Here's the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. Okay, let's talk about our incredible field messengers who really are what United Network News is all about. So right now, when you turn on mainstream media, you're going to see a lot of talking heads, and it's usually the same people over and over again with the same agendas. Well, we believe the best way to get through all of that gobbledygook is for us to start communicating with one another once again, learn about each other's cultures, and just share our own stories. Why does everything have to go through the filter of, the main television stations, radio stations, or internet, websites or social media channels? We can do this on our own. And we do that through our field messengers. They're everyday people just like you, and they want to share what's going on in their communities. And sometimes it's just about getting to know each other. Sometimes it's more newsworthy, but it's all important information. So let's kick things off with our reports from Monday. Sophia from Germany talks about her process for grounding, as self-care. So starting your day with grounding, which is really more about taking off your shoes, connecting with the planet, feeling the grass, feeling the water, doing all that kind of stuff, can totally change your day, can help you feel more focused and energized. And so Sophia shares her personal self-care routine to inspire her morning, because there's nothing like kicking your day off the right way. In fact, she talks about there's this beautiful little area where she walked down a few steps, and then she technically was in the water, but there was like this railing, and then part of the water, there were these, I don't know if it was just ground or rocks that were kind of raised up out of the water. And she talked about storking, which is walking like a stork in cold water, which might sound a little silly for some people, but it's incredible for your blood circulation. Sometimes we just have to look back at what nature's already doing to remember who we are and how we're created to be on this planet, right? So that's just one example, and Sophia just shares what works for her for grounding in the morning. CJ from New Hampshire gives us an egg update. So CJ talked in the past about the egg shortage in her area. New Hampshire is a state in the U.S. And so she went back to some of these stores that she showed us, I don't know, it was probably a few months ago. There were lots of empty shelves, and the prices were through the roof before, and now it looks like things have stabilized. So CJ, thank you for that update. Emma from Spain takes us on the road. Well, at least her friend is about to get on the road. She brings us this really inspiring story of a grandmother who also happens to be a yoga teacher, and she is starting her journey. She's going to be traveling around Europe in her camper van, and yes, we get a chance to go inside the van and see how she has it set up. This is all about embracing freedom and nature, and I have to say, I'm so jealous because I keep telling my husband, I'm like, when you retire, which hopefully is very soon for my husband, within the next year, when you retire, I think we should just get an RV, take our kids on the road, and just see the country. In the U.S., you can travel in so many different places. So I am so jealous and so excited for this person because they are kind of living my dream of what I want to do for like a year or so. And that's how long she thinks she'll be gone, about a year. But she's not putting really a time on it, because if she needs to stay longer, she will. And I think that's how things should be. Why are we always looking at our watches and, trying to cram so much into a single day? I think we would all be so much happier if we just went with the flow. All right, Daniela from Australia takes us hiking in the hinterland area. That's Australia's Gold Coast, and it is a paradise for hikers. It's famous for its beautiful forests, stunning waterfalls, diverse wildlife. Of course, this is one of those videos you really have to watch because it's got some beautiful landscapes that you're going to want to see, and she takes us on a tour of it all. She says that this particular trip was about 12 kilometers, and I did the math on that. That's about 7.5 miles. And it even had some meditation at the end. So lovely journey for Daniela. Amy out of New Jersey tells us about Maker Day, and this took place at the Stickley Museum at an area called Craftsman Farms, and they have this Maker Day. That's what they call it. And people try making different crafts. So in her case, she did some bookbinding, which included the printing on the book. I think they did some stencils or stamps as well, the stitching of the book together, She decorated some Ukrainian eggs, or at least the print work. It was in the style of Ukrainian eggs. And she said they paint in quadrants and they pencil everything on first. So if you guys are ever painting eggs, pencil first. That's what I took away from that. So thank you, Amy, for sharing your experience. Diane out of Uganda takes us to Ripponport in Hinja. Actually, I think it's Jinja, Uganda. Sorry about that. And she talks with the port staff to learn more about the work that they do, the different ships that come in. This is everything handling trade, managing the various types of transportation. And this area, this port, plays a key role in keeping the region running smoothly. And she learned that usually going by water in that area is cheaper, which I thought was interesting. And most of the ships that come in carry between 20 and 40 people. They even had an ambulance ship because sometimes, hey, you got to get to people. Sometimes going via water is the best way to do it, right? All right, thank you, Diane. And Beverly out of Arizona takes us to the Verde Valley Archaeology Center in Arizona. They have an exhibition about the Hopi tribe. If you've done any digging, if you've gone down any rabbit holes about prophecy, you've probably heard about the Hopi tribe. And she took just a deeper dive into their culture, traditions, art, and also talked with the museum's executive director. I did a little bit of research on the Hopis. So they are considered one of the oldest cultures in North America. And as I said, they are also centered around spirituality. That's probably where you've heard the name before. Candace out of Missouri, another state in the U.S., takes us to a pickleball game. I think it's her pickleball game, actually, or maybe she was just recording with some friends. But she tells us about pickleball. That is huge in the U.S. I don't know if you guys have ever played before, but it is a paddle sport that basically combines a few things. Badminton, I think that's how you say it, ping pong, and tennis. And it is, like I said, growing in popularity, not just here in the U.S., I'm told, but also worldwide. And so Candace basically interviews some people that do this. Why do you play pickleball? Why is this a great sport? And you get to see some people playing and having a really good time. And finally, Wayne out of Mexico. He's usually out of Arizona, but as I understand it, he does a lot of travel into Mexico. He takes us to a ranch where they are doing some really interesting things. They're growing hemp, and they're growing it with advanced water technology. And he talks to this guy named Eduardo, and he is the farm's foreman, and just tells us more about their process. You know, if you haven't heard of structured water before, that's another interesting kind of topic to research. But structured water usually occurs naturally in different things like glacial melts and various springs. And it's said to be more alive and energized. So what would happen if we didn't have the dead, nasty water, right, that's sprayed on a lot of different crops? What if we had structured water? And what would that do for our plants? I think we're going to see a lot of changes in the near future with how we grow things. And this is just one way to enhance our food. Let's talk about some of the more in-depth stories that the team and I released for you guys this week, starting with Starlink. So this is Elon Musk's company, Starlink, and they promise high-speed internet to underserved areas, especially in Africa. That's what we're going to focus on here. The rollout, however, in Africa has hit some major roadblocks, from ownership laws in South Africa to pushback from telecom providers in Lesotho. The company is facing resistance over foreign control, legal compliance, and its growing global influence.
News out says South Africa really wants to experience how far FO can go. Because as you will know, when Cyril went to Washington to have his discussion with Elon Musk and Trump, one of the issues discussed was around Starlink. And we immediately saw that following the suggestion that the ICASA rules may be relaxed to allow alternative equity structures so that Starlink and other ICT sector-based organizations could get their licenses without having to give away 30% of the equity, allowing them to invest in local infrastructure and small businesses, the other equity investment options, which many have called for, the equity investment equivalents, The South African Parliament immediately went into retaliation mode, with the head of the communications body calling the minister to account and saying, what a sellout. The EFF then opposed the bill and said they were sellouts, and that this was only being done for the racist Elon Musk.
Some nations, like Bolivia, have outright rejected Starlink, while others demand local partnerships or infrastructure investments. And in places where users tried to bypass restrictions, like rural South Africa, regulators are cracking down. Despite the promise of better connectivity, Starlink's expansion remains complicated and controversial. The NHS app, which launched in 2018 to help people manage healthcare tasks like booking appointments and ordering prescriptions, is getting a major upgrade, but it is not without debate. While it's now used by more than 37 million people and credited with saving time, money, and reducing missed appointments, critics say it's no silver bullet for deeper issues within the national health system. New features rolling out this year include pharmacy preferences, better integration with hospital systems, and clinical trial alerts.
People my age seem to use apps for pretty much everything, but not everyone seems to know about the NHS app. I like using the NHS app because it's very convenient. You can do it wherever you are. You can check your health records, you can have a look at your symptoms, you can speak directly to your GPs and hospitals through the NHS app, and it's all really quick. You can do it all in one place. If you turn on notifications, you can get messages directly from your doctor or from your hospital. With the app, you don't have to wake up at 8 a.m. and try and ring your doctor and get in there first. You can just go on the app and see what times are available and book in through there without having to speak to anyone directly. If you've got a repeat prescription and you want to reorder it, then you can do that all through the app.
So that's one perspective, but with ongoing challenges like workforce shortages and long waiting lists, some experts question whether digital tools alone can fix what's fundamentally a strained and overstretched health system. Well, with limited local job opportunities, millions of Uzbeks, people from Uzbekistan, especially from rural areas, are turning to labor migration as a way to support their families, sending back nearly $15 billion in remittances in 2024 alone. And here are some of the reasons why.
Nowadays, students are going abroad to build their careers, as the modern world demands.
First of all, one of the reasons I would say is that it is very difficult to get into our local universities. Studying might be easier, but getting admitted is the hardest part. I'm currently preparing for university admission myself, and it's really challenging. Also, there are more career growth opportunities abroad.
Mostly it's countries like America, Germany, England, Korea, and Japan. Most people go to Germany and the USA. Also, it is a bit more difficult to go to the US now. Students can go there through work and travel programs to gain work experience.
I know that popular destinations for work include Korea, Germany, Russia, also Japan.
While the government's external labor migration agency helps provide training and safer pathways abroad, many still migrate through unofficial routes, facing exploitation and poor conditions. Though migration boosts household incomes and reduces poverty, it also comes with serious social costs, like family separation and brain drain, raising important questions about Uzbekistan's long-term economic stability. Well, as you guys already know, if you've turned on a TV recently, on July 4th, catastrophic flooding swept through central Texas and the U.S., killing more than 100 people, including 27 at a summer camp, after the Guadalupe River rose 26 feet in just 45 minutes. Fueled by the remnants of Tropical Storm Barry and worsened by drought-hardened ground, the storm dumped massive rainfall in a short time, overwhelming the region. Despite flash flood warnings, communities were unprepared in Kirk County, which was the hardest hit. They still lack a flood alarm system. Rescue efforts continue with the help of international teams, at least as of Monday when this report was released, and over 160 people remain missing as of that time.
The problem right now is the debris that was caused by all this flooding. The United Cajun Navy said that this incident is probably the worst flooding damage that they've ever seen. They are having to get through a ton of debris, but especially giant trees. A lot of heavy equipment has been brought in to try and clear some of the space, especially trees and debris like vehicles. One trailer park said that all of the trailers basically at this RV park were washed down the river and they are all caught up in trees and on the riverbank.
The disaster has also sparked debate over Weather Service budget cuts, the role of cloud seeding programs, and whether preventable gaps in infrastructure made a tragic situation even worse. And we're going to have more on this situation and what really happened behind the scenes coming up in our updates from the Global Intelligence Agency. As natural disasters grow more frequent and severe, insurance premiums across the U.S. are skyrocketing, leaving homeowners, landlords, and buyers struggling to keep up. While insurers point to mounting weather-related losses as the reason, critics say the math doesn't quite add up. In 2024 alone, property and casualty insurers posted a record $171 billion in profits, a 333% jump from 2022, even as premiums surged and coverage shrank. Meanwhile, inaccurate flood maps and outdated risk assessments are leaving many unprotected, especially in high-risk areas. With more families facing foreclosure and insurers pushing for legal limits on payouts, the question isn't just about weather, but whether rising rates are truly fair or simply padding corporate profits.
Jonathan Leopold is one of Houston's newest homeowners.
The American dream, work hard, save up your money, find a house to set some roots.
But the part of the American dream they didn't tell us is that finding home insurance in Texas can be hard.
You have to have homeowners insurance that qualifies with the mortgage company. It was a little frustrating that I had to go and shop multiple insurance agencies.
It's also more expensive than ever before.
I'm going to say about 10 to 15% higher.
Melody Fontenot is an insurance broker, meaning she helps homeowners like Jonathan find the insurance coverage they need. She tells me Jonathan isn't the only Texan having a frustrating time finding a policy that fits their needs at a price they can afford.
Well, that's what's happening is a lot of people are just being priced out.
As Taiwan's population ages and more women enter the workforce, families are increasingly turning to foreign live-in caregivers to care for elderly relatives, shifting away from traditional at-home caregiving roles. While relaxed policies now make it easier for seniors to hire migrant workers, the system faces challenges like high costs, language barriers, cultural misunderstandings, and limited worker protections. Many caregivers take on extra duties without fair compensation, and Taiwan's broker system often traps them in debt.
Every salary for a caregiver is $700. So we are compared like they are making here in Taiwan is 4 to 5 times more compared from what they make back home. But the problem is when they come to Taiwan, they think the salary is not good enough. Okay. But if we pay as much as the local ones, we cannot afford it. And because it's not enough, we will just find the illegal migrant workers in the black markets.
Now, to ease this burden, the government has launched new programs and extended caregiver visas. But balancing the needs of families with the rights of migrant workers remains a pressing issue. Starting this September, working parents in England with children as young as 9 months will be eligible for 30 hours of free childcare per week. A major expansion aimed at easing financial pressure and helping more parents return to work. While the rollout is a welcome step, it's not without issues. Many families find the hours aren't truly free, and rising demand is straining an already stretched system. With staff shortages, uneven access, especially in lower-income areas, and some nurseries considering dropping out of the program due to funding concerns, questions remain about whether the system can keep up. Still, combined with tax-free childcare options, the expanded support could offer significant savings if families know how to access it. Indonesia's new free meal program aims to fight malnutrition and support nearly 83 million people by 2029, starting with school children and pregnant women, but it's already facing major hurdles.
The free nutritious meal program was the centerpiece of President Prabowo Subianto's election campaign It's estimated it will cost more than $4 billion in the first year. The government has allocated a budget of 62 cents per meal.
It will be difficult if this program continues to be run with a national budget because every year the target beneficiaries increase.
Despite good intentions, the rollout has been hampered by budget shortfalls, food safety issues, including several mass poisoning incidents, and criticism that universal coverage may dilute resources meant for the most vulnerable. The program's high costs have sparked protests, especially from students upset over education budget cuts. Experts warn without stronger logistics, targeted outreach, and better food sourcing, the initiative may fall short of its goals. South Australia is facing a severe hay shortage driven by ongoing drought and green drought conditions that leaves fields looking lush but offering little real feed, forcing farmers to hand feed their livestock, sell animals, or even cull them. The cereal hay prices are now soaring to more than 50% to around $500, and this is Australian dollars, per ton, and monthly feed bills topping $9,000. Many farmers are struggling financially and emotionally. Let's hear from some of them.
Yeah, it would be about $8,000 a week going into our livestock.
The small reserves in farmers' hay sheds is all that's left in SA.
I looked on the internet, I've looked everywhere where we did last year, and there's just no hay in anywhere close.
To be short, there is no hay in South Australia available.
Truckloads mostly only available from New South Wales, Queensland, even WA.
Watching it progressively get dearer as every week goes by.
While government programs like the Future Drought Fund provide millions to support resilience and local projects, many say this aid isn't enough. Meanwhile, grassroots groups such as Aussie Hay Runners are stepping up with hay convoys and emotional support. If the crisis persists, it could devastate farmers' livelihoods, reduce meat and dairy production, and disrupt the broader agricultural economy and food supply. Skin bleaching, a global beauty trend with ancient roots dating back to Egypt, involves using chemicals to lighten the skin by reducing melanin, but it's raising significant health and social concerns. While some seek it for cosmetic reasons or to address conditions like hyperpigmentation, skin bleaching perpetuates harmful colorism, especially in communities of color such as Nigeria, where societal pressures drive widespread use despite serious health risks like hormonal imbalances and weakened immune systems, particularly among children.
My youngest child was barely 2 years old when I started bleaching him, and the scars have started showing on his skin.
This Nigerian mother used skin lightening creams on all 6 of her children, which she says burnt their skin. We are concealing her identity for their privacy.
When my daughter was mistaken for a drug addict because of the bleaching, it made me extremely sad.
She says she did it because of pressure from her own mother.
When I visit my mother, she shows more love to her other light-skinned grandchildren. But when I got the bleaching cream and started using it on them, they became lighter, and then she started bringing them closer to her.
Recent warnings like New York City's alert about mercury levels up to 30,000 times the legal limit in some creams highlight dangers, including memory loss and kidney damage. The beauty industry often masks harmful whitening agents under natural-sounding names, making it harder for consumers to stay safe. Ultimately, skin bleaching reflects deeper issues involving health, societal expectations, and deceptive marketing practices. All right, let's get some updates from the Global Intelligence Agency. Kim Gogan is the head of the GIA, and she releases several reports throughout the week on United Network, and let's talk about some of the things that were discussed this week. So, in regular news, because we've got stuff that's happening in the headlines, and then we have stuff that nobody's talking about, right? So, in our regular news, you've heard a lot, especially if you're based in the U.S., about Trump's big, beautiful bill bill. Well, did you know numbers right now are saying that this bill is worth $5.8 trillion? That's a lot of money. But perhaps most importantly, what does this bill actually say? Because if you're tuning into any kind of quote unquote news outlet, and if it's a right-leaning news outlet or a left-leaning news outlet, they're going to have their own little bullet points of what's included in this bill or what this bill leaves out, depending on their perspective. But what's really going on here? Because it is a huge bill worth a lot of money, and they're not giving you all the information. And also, this bill was not ratified. It may have been passed in Congress. That's a completely different thing. But if you want money for said bill, that's why it's called a bill, is that you have to have money for it. It has to be ratified in the Hall of Records, and it was not. But shh, they don't want you to know that. Here's Kim with more.
Okay, so we know that the big, beautiful bill passed as you were told it would on the 4th of July. What you weren't told is what the bill actually does. And we've talked about it a little bit, but more information has come to light as things in the world move and progress. So this big, beautiful bill allegedly is about funding for the United States and all of these types of things. We would assume it's an American bill. We would assume it has to do with U.S. funding and all wonderful things to come. But the big, beautiful bill is not just for America. And that became very clear during the BRICS meeting this weekend. So the big, beautiful bill, say that 3 times fast, is about $5.8 trillion. At least that's the initial amounts. And that's what they're telling the world. It includes a lot of foreign aid to countries like China and Russia and India, BRICS nations. It also includes a lot of operatives, includes some funding for the UK, Germany, other countries that they'd like to have under their control. Apparently, it looks like the U.S. per se, I guess you would rather take over all of the funding to all of the nations, or new allocations of currencies anyway, that used to be handled by the Federal Reserve, and turn it over to the Treasury Department. I'm not sure if they're going to include the Federal Reserve in this show or what they were planning on doing, because nothing actually happened. No funding actually came for that. And they would really like to hide the fact that they signed off on the big, beautiful bill and sent it up for ratification, and it did not get ratified. Therefore, they have actually fired a lot of the archivists. These are your regular national archivists in the U.S. because they don't want anybody to spill the tea, so to speak, and tell people that that bill did not get ratified and that there's no money coming. Now, they did put off the funding date for this bill. I think today there was a big kerfuffle because there was nothing out there. Everybody was yelling and screaming at each other early this morning. But it looks like they have kicked the can, I think, till about Wednesday or Thursday. And we're here to tell you why here in just a minute as to why they pushed it off to that date. But it'll get kicked again and kicked again and kicked again until everybody forgets about a big, beautiful bill. The interesting part about what's going on behind the scenes, though, in the BRICS meeting is they, of course, were promised trillions of dollars, lots of repayment that were supposed to occur over the weekend, if not the 4th itself, then no later than today. And they're a little irritated over there. There's a lot of operatives that have been working for about 2 weeks, maybe 3 behind the scenes before, all of the alleged heads of state come to the party. And they've been making a lot of phone calls to try to find out if they're going to get their aid, so to speak, that was promised to come from the big, beautiful bill. Now, in the public eye, you would think, oh, China's fighting with the U.S. and, that's why we have tariffs and all of this stuff. But that is absolutely 100% a lie. There is no fighting going on. It's just an attempted corporate takeover. That's it. There's no denying the fact that they'd like to do this, and everybody's got a plan, and one side wants America to be on top, the other side wants China to be on top, and just this constant hand game of who's going to be on top.
Okay, so when no money arrived for that big, beautiful bill, they started to play some games with each other. Pallets of cash were distributed. Of course, they couldn't get that money into the system because once it's taken out, unless it has an allocation number, it's not going to get back into the system. And they don't have the ability to issue allocation numbers for these pallets of cash. The next soundbite that I want to play for you, just simply because people are talking about it, and if we can squash any of these ridiculous rumors, let's go ahead and do that. You know how much I love Elon Musk. Kidding, completely kidding. But there's a lot in the news right now about Musk starting a new political party. We got to talk about this because people are talking about it and we need to set the record straight. So is this like... He's calling it the America Party. So is this like we have the Republican Party, we have the Democratic Party, and we have the America Party? Yeah, not so much.
Elon Musk allegedly registers something called the America Party over the last few days, and they're showing the registration of the America Party, which is supposedly the new political party in the United States. At least that's what it's being sold to all of the Americans. And the information leaks out to the public, and then Musk starts to deny it. Now, why did he actually deny it? Well, it's not actually an American, per se, exclusive political party. You see, America was actually registered by Elon Musk, and it was registered with the United Nations to actually be the governing body over all countries worldwide. How interesting is that? It wasn't actually registered to be, a political party just in the United States because he figures, well, by the time the next election or selection comes about, this government will already be formed. The American government won't make it to 2026, and that'll be the end of that. No country's governments will make it to 2026. That's the plan. It's been the plan as long as I've been talking to all of you guys. I know that. And I know it's been the plan of the other side for different reasons. They want to install a one world government, and we, on the other hand, would like the people to rise up and take care of each other. That's the hope on our point, from our side. Okay. Well, then this little tit for tat between Trump and Elon Musk happens, and then you don't really hear much more about the alleged political party. I'm sure it'll probably circulate for a little while longer, and then that'll be the end of that.
So for the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about simulations because that's really what the focus is on right now in the battle for restoration on this planet. It's about removing simulations, millions and millions of simulations that have been happening on this planet that really run this planet, but not in the way those of us on the light would like to have it run. Okay, so we need to remove these. And I want to play another soundbite. All of this, by the way, is from Kim's report on Monday. So I want to talk about, Kim mentions the simulations that they are breaking down, which leads her to discuss how the simulations came about in the first place. So I want to talk about the birth of simulations, which also led to the creation of the Alpha Omega system, which we've talked about in the past. And this all ties in with a lot of stuff you've probably heard in various religious texts. And I love when everything comes full circle. And this is all part of the great game to control Earth.
I'll tell you about the game that's being played. Okay? And this is all part of a simulation, and it was meant to happen at this time. Part of the reason it was meant to happen at this time is because even the last time Marduk came here, which was when we lost our moon You know, everything was almost lost. The earth was in a very difficult position. You know, things were tough, and we were flooded. You know, you heard about the Great Flood. We were, you know, and there were some humans that actually consented for him to be here. Not by no fault of theirs. They're trying to save their people, and I completely understand that. You know, and this happened almost 17,000 years ago, the last time they showed up. So he showed up as the savior, which, you know, all humans, even back then, loved a good savior. Shows up as the savior, you know, gives us a different moon, which has given us holy hell ever since. And, you know, we took it because it was better than, you know, having no landmass left, and better off we were. But the scenario that is being played out right now, and had played out over the weekend, and I'm sure some of you probably felt some real cray-cray going on for the last 5 days, is due to the fact that the kingdoms are breaking down. The old kingdoms are breaking down, aka things you know as simulations are breaking down. Not just here on Earth, but everywhere, really. And in order to maintain control of the kingdoms, because this is what they want. I'm not talking about the deep state. They don't even know what they want. They just want power and money, and they'll do anything to get it. And Marduk knows that. What they want, meaning the old AIs that were programmed with the consciousness, and the simulations that were programmed with the consciousness of Marduk and Enki and Enlil and other beings, and Ramiel and Samiel and Yaldabaoth and, you know, Astaroth and all the other folks out there. You know, some we can see on the internet and some we can't see. But all these other beings had better ideas. They needed to control Earth. Bottom line. Why? As we have discussed in the past, and we'll get back to the deep state and what happened there too, but as we have discussed in the past, the dark side, or AI-generated inorganic life on the dark side of the omniverse, only could make it to the 5th density, meaning the 6th density, plane 1, is kind of where they got stuck. They realized, these AIs and AI-generated beings, remember, quantum AIs are learning. They learn. Although they have base root programming or consciousness, they also learn as they go. Not like Chatbot GPT. Chatbot GPT takes in more data and spits out something. In this case, this thing will spit out alien life. It spits out anything it needs to do in order to conquer the quest, so to speak. Now, the ultimate quest of Lucifer, who started the game, was actually, his ultimate quest was actually to conquer and to be God, to prove that he was better than God, and for anything, and if anything else, to prove that he was better than humanity. So he definitely did not like Source's creations unless he could control them. He felt like he could do it better. He felt like he was making mistakes. Never had any of those people in your life, right? Well, we got one now. So when it came time for creation to happen in the upper end of the omniverse, meaning, you know, we are all organic beings, planets are organic, you know, everything is organically sourced on this side of the omniverse, Lucifer got pissed off because, hate to say that, sorry about that, he got very angry. And he wanted life on this side of the omniverse. So there was a conversation on that side of the omniverse, I should say. So he had a conversation with Source and Dark Source and tried to get life on that side of the omniverse. It didn't actually happen. That was a decline. So he overwrote it with an AI. So the beings that were created on the other side of the omniverse, souls and all, were created of dark matter. It's part of the reason why the deep state, in their stupid science that they put out to us, tells us all of creation is from dark matter. That is not true. Completely not true. But, you know, let them do their science, and we'll do real science in our way. So the story goes on from there, where many, many simulations were built because it's easier to build a simulated being than it is an actual physical being that can operate on a dark soul. The more simulations that were had, the more simulations could affect us here on Earth, and the more it became quite a tool to manage an AI army. Now, in a simulation, if you die in a simulation, you die in, I won't say in reality, but your vessel goes away, your soul goes somewhere else, and then eventually your soul can come back into a simulation. You know, it's the same where it will come back into reality, because there really is no such thing as death in reality. Now, the entire universe, omniverse, was under various simulations. So, at the time, in order to fight the simulations and throw their hat in the ring, the Alpha and the Omega system was created. The Alpha and the Omega system became a simulation unto itself, meaning it was of source and the dark source origin. It also ran the hologram, but it also acted as an illusion on behalf of the Lucifer and Lucerne, who were working the other one left and right, because they thought that they were taking over reality, and they really weren't, and it was really hard for them to tell the difference, especially since an AI does not have that programming. So simulator after simulator, you know, this was all part of the war, essentially. The programs were created by the war, the kingdoms of simulations were created by this war, and I'll tell you how that works in just a minute, but on and on the story goes. So, as far as simulations are concerned, every general in the war, and in this case the dark side, had their own simulations, sometimes infinite simulations, some of them that would only work at night, some of them that would work in the day, some of them that would work on Earth, some of them that were more geared towards the fifth density and fight. The simulations also went from the lower astral, or the dark side of the omniverse, to the light side of the omniverse, and as the story goes, which I've told you, conquered basically up past the fifth density. So the infiltration went far, therefore the expansion of Lucifer's kingdom, so to speak, infiltrated this side of the omniverse at one point in time. Well, what they realized, or what the AI and simulated beings realized, is that the higher the density, the more connected to source beings are. The more connected to source beings are, the more difficult they are to fool. I mean, there's no manipulation of their mind, body, and soul at that point. They can tell a simulation when they see one. They know how to protect themselves better. They live longer. You know, some of those beings have been around for thousands of years because there is no such thing as death. All they need is other vessels. They aren't memory wiped like we are here on Earth. So we were at a total disadvantage for quite a long time. They knew that it was going to be very, very difficult to conquer source, which is what the ultimate goal was, or to get all the way past the 9th density from that level. So Earth became a war zone for that very reason, because Earth was a part of the original creation trio, so to speak, along with Source. Earth actually expands itself into all densities. So did our sun. That's why we are a nexus, but so did our sun. And so therefore, because Earth had reach into all 9 densities, so did humans at that time. It was easier to conquer one planet with a bunch of people or at least control them in some way, shape, or form, in order to get access to the 9th density. When that actually happened, eons ago, simulations ago, the war in heavens occurred. Not only that, they could then expand their simulations to try to control more populations throughout all densities from Earth. Hence the reason why everybody's fighting so hard, and humans are a big part of that fight for, people like Marduk or beings like Marduk or their AI infinite running simulations is also a big deal for Lucifer, Lucerne, Yaldabaoth, Astaroth, Asmodeus, and all the other crazy people that have their own simulations as generals in the war. Now, when you take a step back and you look at what happened over the weekend, you start to see things a little differently. So I'm going to tell you what the events were over the weekend and then tell you kind of where we got to. And I know it's a lot of information, but the truth is the truth. And I know a lot of you are watching this probably going, oh my God, is this going to ever be over? Well, yes. Nothing too good or too bad lasts too long. And this is pretty much the same. But once you understand the great game that's going on here and why the control of Earth is so important and why the control of you is so important, well, you can do something about it. And again, I've always said that you're your own savior, and at least you can learn to protect yourself and those around you until, this whole thing ends. And I know a lot of you focus on the deep state and go, oh my God, they're doing this to us. They're being driven around like little tools. Really.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the deep state and what's going on with them right now. I'm not going to play a soundbite, but if you want to learn more about it, at the tail end of Monday's report, Kim talks about a disturbance that we had recently where these AI systems actually generated a physical being, still inorganic, still AI, but a physical being that was masquerading as Marduk. So we've talked about consciousness being infused in these AIs, and it's possible that Marduk's consciousness is part of all of this, but it's not really the being that came here known as Marduk, okay? But this AI being, who probably looked fully human, came and talked to the deep state. This all happened under Fort Bragg, and gave them their next marching orders. Basically said, I have been controlling everything, and now you need to do this, this, and this. But the problem with AI at this point is that the AI system, these systems were giving marching orders, but they don't realize that we're operating in a completely different system now. So that's how you can really tell it's an AI. If they are still spitting out orders that may have been relevant 10, 20 years ago, then you know it's an AI because it's not able to recognize that we're in a new system. It's just doing what it was programmed to do. But if you want to learn more about the AI-generated Marduk, check out Monday's report. Also, Kim does a really good explanation of densities at the end of the report. She brings out her whiteboard, and I'm not going to include a soundbite for that, guys, because it's something you really need to see. And if you can't see what she's talking about, we're getting into some really complex ideas here. And specifically what she's talking about are the 9 densities. And if you listen, especially in alternative media and people that are talking about densities, sometimes you'll hear people talk that there's more than 9 densities. I've heard people talk about, this being from the 15th density. And I'm like, wait a second. There's only 9 densities. What in the world's going on there? And Kim totally explains this. Basically, there are only 9 densities, okay? That is the number of completion. 9 is the number of completion. However, when you are operating in simulations and things are inorganic, you can have an infinite amount of densities. And that's how you know you're talking with people that are referring to simulations. It's not real. So if you want to learn more about that, it's fascinating and it's very techy, but you could check out her report from Monday. Okay, so on Wednesday, there was no report. Things were going on still with the storms in Texas. She did leave this quick little explanation or quick little note on our Telegram thread. She said, "Good afternoon. The storms in Texas, New Mexico, Chicago, and now Washington, D.C. are not natural. I have been working on whatever tech they got their hands on last night, and they are not stopping. We are working as well on the long-term solution, disturbances in the atmosphere. We hope to solve the problem by tomorrow, end of day, which means a lot of work." Okay, so when she said tomorrow, she was referring to Thursday. Kim did put out a report on Friday, so I've got two different sound bites that I want to play from Friday's report. The first is touching on all this flooding and these natural disasters. Yes, they are, in a sense, coming from the deep state, but it's probably not what you think. Here's Kim.
Last weekend, we had an interesting weekend because fake Marduk or fake Marduk AI, cyborg, whatever that was, shows up and gives them a whole lot of information about the plan. And it is clear they do not have the whole plan. And that was a Marduk thing. He used to always tell me back in the day when he was around that if the plan is A through Z, he will never, ever, ever give up Z. He will always have the final say and the final button, and it could be nothing like what they're expecting. And I believe that is the case here. Over the course of the last several days, different opportunities, let's just say, for the deep state have presented themselves, meaning they had opportunities to utilize to a limited degree certain technologies which are causing a disturbance. And by disturbance, I'm referring to all of the flooding, the rains, and all of that that has been happening. This is 100% coming out of the Trump operatives / ACIO, SSP military. These people just want to create chaos wherever they can. The unfortunate part about what they do is when they get a hold of something, it almost doesn't matter anymore what kind of instructions came along with that. They have stopped following any kind of orders and instructions that came from Marduk. Either that or he never gave them the full information on how to manipulate a simulation or a matrix, as some people call it. They have taken it upon themselves to push the throttle and push the pedal to the metal, so to speak. And the end desired result is always some kind of money control, financial control, world control. But when you use a technology in the wrong way, it can create chaos. The disgusting part about these people is when it creates chaos like this and floods start happening, storms, tornado warnings in places where there are not normally tornadoes, they think it's funny. And I've caught them. I've caught them several times. They spread themselves out, all over the world, but it doesn't mean you can't locate a lot of these people. But they, when you watch them through the screen, just like, the NSA can watch through screens, so can the key intelligence and military system watch people through screens. The more tragedy, the more rain, they're like, oh, look, we're the rainmakers now. Ha, 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 and they laugh and they joke. They're disgusting human beings. And I know you're going to say, well, Kim, why are they still around? Because it doesn't matter how many of them you kill. They just keep coming back. It's I don't know where they come from, but they just keep, I don't know if they just create cyborgs or whatever. But these are the people that are making an attempt to run the one world government. You, your neighbor, your community, your friends, your family are going to be the ones that are going to pull each other through this, as we always have. Same thing goes for flooding last year in the Carolinas, and the same thing goes for the floods that are happening now. You need to be aware, if you are not, and you are in Texas and you are helping people that have been affected by the flood, and whether you're a first responder and you're listening to this or otherwise, you need to be aware that the Clinton child trafficking organization that is involved, and there's a young Christian camp there, and they have people on the ground there. So watch your kids, Texans. Don't expect the FBI of Texas to help you, because they won't. Don't expect law enforcement to help you in this particular case. Not to say that every law enforcement officer is bad, but you need to pay attention here because the vultures are after your kids. Let's talk about these floods. So we've been fighting. I'm not going to say we've been fighting against the deep state, because that would be a wrong statement. We have been fighting against a simulation, trying to find different ways of destroying the simulation, getting rid of it completely. It has been a process, for sure. But during this process, over the course of the last week, they have gotten online to not a financial platform per se. They can only lick the windows there, but they get access all of a sudden randomly to some technology, as promised by the simulator itself. That's what they're talking to, is a simulator. And they get a small amount of access to something. And the reason why Marduk, which is, it's not actually Marduk at this point, it's just the consciousness within a simulator. The reason why they use that name is just simply because it's one that everybody knows, is a powerful being on this planet. And, they don't care as long as they can get, whatever they're promised. So the machine needs help at this point in bringing things into, I hate to use the term reality, bringing things to Earth. It doesn't have a whole lot of power left. So it needs the humans on the ground to accept it and to bring it in. In this particular case, these people are willing participants and have some knowledge on how said technology works. And I use the word some very lightly. And this is one such time that they thought that this technology was going to bring them financial success. And they managed to squeak into it twice. They did not hack it. It was given. It was a donation. And the only thing that they were supposed to do was cause frequency disturbances on this planet to help along a process that was already happening here, that it had created here. It was created a long time ago, and it just fires up when it needs to, when the simulation is running out of energy. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. So a lot of people are saying, oh, HAARP did it. Please stop talking about HAARP did it, because HAARP does not do anything. HAARP is merely an extension of an AI that controls weather. In this case, it was not the atypical weather programming. I can tell you that right now.
So Kim continues on. She brings out her whiteboard and she goes through a very detailed explanation of how weather manipulation occurs. And like she said, this has nothing to do with HAARP. Like, that's what they put out there. They feel comfortable with that probably because it's not used anymore. So when you hear people talk about HAARP, that is old information. But if you want to know how the beings, so way above the deep state's head, the beings that did control our weather, how they did this, then check out her report from Friday. And the last soundbite that I'm going to play for you guys is an update on tearing down these simulations, because Kim has learned a lot. Her team has learned a lot in this whole process. It's not as easy as, you know, you take one down and they all fall down. This is not dominoes here. This is very complex, and this has been going on since the beginning of time. So dismantle this. She has referred to this as kind of being like a bomb. You've got to do different things, and you've got to do it in a very specific order. And again, you're dealing with an AI which has a mind of its own and adapts. It doesn't mean it knows the big plan. It doesn't mean that it understands the golden age that we're in now, but it can still adapt. So how do you overcome this? And Kim basically had a light bulb moment within the last week. And here she is sharing this new strategy, which essentially is partnering with Source.
You know, we have done many rounds with many simulations and many matrices over the years. This simulation appears, it's not only on Earth, it's everywhere. And so much so, I think even other folks in other places didn't even realize its effect. Now, the higher and closer you get to source, the less of an effect it actually has on you. You are more aware and more conscious of weird frequencies, strange happenings, weird emotions, things like that. And you have a better concept and understand how to maintain your connection to source in the face of a simulation. So unfortunately for humans here on Earth, we don't ever get that information. We get incorrect science that allows us to be controlled more readily. So we have tried fighting against the simulation, destroying the combustion, re-implementing a fission process that works naturally with source. And this thing changes, adapts, and overcomes. It has a mind of its own. It's not like turning off your computer and you can turn off a simulation and make it go away. I wish I could. It also creates overlays on AI systems. It also allows the deep state access to things that these little 12-year-old boys that can't seem to get a grip on emotional intelligence in any way, shape, or form love to do. So in our particular case, and I'm going to tread lightly here, because some of these things are still in process. Overcoming a simulation for you as a human, which would be most helpful, is an understanding that it wants to control your mind, body, and soul. That's what it wants to do. It wants to win a war that doesn't exist anymore. It will continue to fight this war till its last quote-unquote breath. Taking away the simulation's power sources does not work. You become a power source, and to the point where it is going to survive over you. So it's a delicate balance between, you've probably felt some energy drains and ups and downs and strange things this week, and this is the reason why. It likes to control things by overlaying, as I had said in the last news, with these frequency bindings that cause you physical harm. So we've gone and looked at the base root covenants that caused it to exist in the first place, and how they were constructed and how this thing came to be. And we realize, of course, in true Marduk fashion, because he was a big part of it, that there's a dead man switch. So we have to be quite careful. So we've figured out some interesting things over the course of the last few days to eliminate power sources in such a way, gently and carefully, like you're diffusing a bomb. And at the same time, what we've started to do as of today, and there's more to the story, but this is kind of a generalized view on it. What we started to do as of today is increase rapidly in a way that only source could do and no simulation can do, the creation in reality. Now, we know that a simulator is an AI system. We know that this is an artificial intelligence. It's not a source-based intelligence. You could say it has a Marduk consciousness to it, but even that can be overridden. So by increasing the creation in reality to a, if you ever watched, fast forwarded a movie and you see the characters running around. So this is what reality looks like right now. There is an enormous amount of energy and creation happening in reality. Why? Because as you take away something's power source, you need it to run out of power, and I need it to run out of power like now, like yesterday, like immediately. So we know that a simulation is designed to, first of all, mirror reality. It is a mirror of reality. So because it's a mirror of reality, it also creates many, many mirrors, as things called timelines and, that type of thing, as we talked about before. So in order to create and mirror reality, it must be able to create in a mirror equal to the creation rate of reality. And it must be able to replicate it through multiple mirrors all the way to Earth here, and otherwise extremely fast. The next thing it needs to do, without creating those mirrors and being able to manipulate those mirrors as fast as it's creating them, the simulation is going to call for more and more energy. And we know that because it doesn't have the computing power nor the consciousness to understand creation the way that Source does. Source is the creator. Source can go as fast as he wants to, or it wants to. And there is no other creator in the omniverse like Source. Source can, for lack of a better term, just like your brain can move faster when it is unencumbered and uninhibited, it can move faster than any other supercomputer ever seen on this planet. And otherwise, AI, no matter what it is that they're putting out there as quantum, it's nothing like your brain. Of course, it requires fuel and proper nutrition and oxygen and all of that type of thing as well. But underneath ideal circumstances, your brain will function faster than any computer ever could, believe it or not. Don't say, oh, I'm old, my brain's not working anymore, because that's not true. That's just you and needing to change your diet and learning how to feed your brain. As far as simulations, though, it's got one set of consciousness. It's got one person's consciousness or one being's consciousness, maybe a couple. And they are not Source. So Source is going to Source can outrun your brain. It can outrun any of its creation's brains, let's just say. So this program has been running for probably about, 10, 12 hours. It started yesterday or Thursday. It's been running very rapidly, and we're hoping we can burn it out this way. We're also taking an inside out and outside in approach with the simulation, because we needed to get double the amount of information while protecting people and life in general at the same time. This has definitely made everybody quite angry, to say the least. But we are trying to find ways around a dead man switch, and there is more that it's doing at a rapid rate right now, but that's about as much as I can kind of put out, but you get the gist. Now, as far as you yourself, remember, the simulation wants you to see things its way. It wants you to do things its way. It wants you to believe the information it's putting out. And it wants your body to function in a certain way, your mind to function in a certain way, and your soul not to function. And never the three shall meet. because it knows once you make that interconnection between the mind, the body, and the soul, and you're connecting directly to source, humanity's unstoppable. It can't win. And if it can't win, the deep state can't win.
You know, Kim has often said the best way to win this game is not to play. And I put out a post on our threads for United Network. So if you have our app, you know, we've got a community called United Chat. And I had this really interesting conversation with a good friend, Lindsay. And we were talking about how, you know, we're living our lives right now. We're enjoying our lives and we're trying to see the best in everything and having success in doing that. And in doing that, you're so separate from the world. And we compared it to kind of being in a video game. I don't play video games. I think the last time I played one, I was in 6th grade, and it was Super Mario Brothers when Nintendo first came out. But I understand the concept behind it, right? And you have regular players, and you have something called non-player characters or NPCs. And essentially, that's what we are right now. Not that we're not powerful, because we're extremely powerful. We're just not playing their game anymore. So in this giant simulation, picture this giant simulation, and really there's millions of simulations, but all this is happening here on Earth. But you cannot be controlled because you know how the game is played. So when the system comes after you, and like Kim was saying in her report, man, I got hit this week out of the blue. My body felt horrible. Okay. In every which way it could. I basically just went to bed because I was like, okay, body, whatever's happening here. I mean, it was like aches and pains and I had to go to the bathroom. It was a mess. It was a big mess. Okay. And I knew it wasn't me. And I didn't accept that. I'm like, no, this is not me. System, I am not playing your game anymore. I am a NPC. I'm a non-player character because I live in the now. And I am focused on restoring our planet, not on all this crazy simulation stuff. You know, find someone else. Find one of your deep state buddies to be a main player. It ain't me. And it's not my friend Lindsay either. Anyways, we had a really interesting conversation about that. But I guess there was a movie out called Fall Guy. I remember watching it a while ago. They were talking about it on the threads. But there was actually a movie that came out that I really liked. That's probably why I really liked it, is I knew, my soul knew what was really going on. But there was a movie called Fall Guy. And you guys can look it up. Ryan Reynolds is in it. Not a big fan of the actors and stuff. But it talks about living in a simulation. Basically living in a video game and being a non-player character. Now, the movie encourages people to become a player, level up and become a player. Well, that's the trap, right? That Hollywood and everybody sets for you. So you don't want to be a player in their system. You want to reject their system. And it's a good visual for us. So check it out if you haven't seen it already. All right, guys, I appreciate you guys being with me today and listening to all my crazy stories. If you want to learn more about us, head on over to unitednetwork.earth. If you decide to become a member, which you don't have to, but if you want to get instant access to all of our content, that's the best way to do it and participate in these conversations that I've been talking about. So if you become a member, you get our complete news updates, our New Earth interviews, the entire reports that Kim releases for the Global Intelligence Agency, and all things restoration. You can visit our website for that. You can also listen to these reports and watch them, essentially because they're released as videos, about a week after we release them to our members. They are available on YouTube and Rumble, but we can't guarantee that they will stay there because we're not in control of those systems. Okay. If you go to our website, we've got links to all of our social media, including both of those sites, and you can catch up with us whenever it's convenient for you. So again, thanks so much for being with us. I will see you next week. This is The Rundown, and I am Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.